education's about. Like,
Mm.
someone once asked me, I had this amazing lady give a guest lecture once many years ago, and the first question she asked my students, so she stood in the lecture theatre with like 200 university students, and she said, if an alien came down to our planet and they saw you and they came over and they said, what on earth is your education system about? What would you say? And the discussion from that was really interesting. And that question's always stuck with me. Like, if an alien came down and asked us what our education system is about, what would we say? And I feel like a lot of us in England and USA
Mm-hmm.
would maybe not be saying what we would love it to be. Like, it doesn't feel like it's
Yeah.
quite there yet, right?
No, in fact, I feel like we're kind of, and I think the intentions were good because I understand like in the United States we had the No Child Left Behind Act, which I think the intentions were good, but there's a like a comedy of errors as far as misunderstandings to the point where we're putting the cart before the horse, and we've gotten to a situation where we're forgetting what's really important. And like, how important is student growth versus passing a standard? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, to you, how wouldn't you agree that student growth is much more important?
They're chalk and cheese, right?
Yeah.
Because you're teaching people to do a test.
Yeah.
And we use the word grooming. I would say they're being groomed for understanding what the questions look like. Like, I've seen teachers even making sure all their homework they send home is in like the same font as the SATs papers. Like, it
Yeah.
looks the same. So we're kind of preparing them so the paper's not a shock. So again, you'd question, how true are these tests when they've been doing past papers? But yeah, you're right. Student growth is all that matters. So I can see again why we need to check what's happening in schools.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure you've heard there's been some really shocking things over here recently about Ofsted, who are the inspectors for most of our schools, and the pressures on head teachers. We unfortunately had a head teacher who committed suicide because
Oh,
she just felt so much pressure. And
that's
she was
terrible.
an amazing person. And so just really, I think when you look at preparing children to pass a test, it makes you question, is that growing them in the right way? Or
Mm-hmm.
are we just, growing them on a conveyor belt?
Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder too how the education system as a whole really is focused for. I mean, let me ask you this really open-ended question: what should I'm not gonna say what is, but what should be the purpose of an educator, of a teacher, in the lives of students from primary school, which is our elementary school, all the way up to university?
Oh, what is the purpose?
What
So,
or what should be the purpose? Because I think sometimes that's kind of like that. What is our why? What is our collective why?
mhm.
And what should it be when educating students? Would you say?
So yeah, and I often think about this a lot actually, about even the word teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I actually think when we question like what is our role, I quite like the thought more of like a facilitator. Like, we
Mm.
should be facilitating, but maybe even more than that. Like, particularly now as someone who, I was a primary school teacher for 11 years. I'm now I work at university as a professor, but um, what I realize is I'm mostly a coach. I
Yeah.
feel like my students come in, they're feeling anxious about something, like things are going on at home, and I feel like I'm coaching them. So
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of your role is that, right? It's not just delivering the academic content, but it's about nurturing this person, like having this person feel heard. So I think you need to be a good listener, you need to be approachable, you need people skills.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this always sticks with me. Once I had a student many years ago, obviously no name. They had amazing attendance. Their attendance was 100%, pretty much 100%. I think they're one of the only students I've ever known get 100% for coming to every lecture and every seminar. They came out with a first, so that's our highest degree. Not sure, do you call it a first in
Uh,
America?
no, we first. Not sure what that equates to.
Well, it's like the best degree you can get at around 21.
Usually, well, that's you can get. Well, you probably get with honors. We have like honors and valedictorian, but probably
Okay, honors.
valedictorian. Yeah.
Okay, so like the best kind of category that they could get, but they couldn't get onto a teacher training program. And so, okay, they were very committed. They were amazing at doing their assignments. They had amazing grades. But actually, one thing maybe they didn't have was the people skills to be a good teacher. And they didn't get onto a teacher training program still, as far as I'm aware. And that really made me question what does make a good teacher. And I think it's about being human and non-judgmental. And it really interesting for me, I think a lot of the skills you need actually aren't to do with teaching at all.
Yeah, it's people. You're right. It's being human, people skills. It's very similar. I was a robotics mentor for several years, and one of the interesting things was that a lot in elementary school, a lot of the teachers just simply assumed that any student that was labeled gifted or any student that was making the best grades would be a good fit for robotics. But what we found was it was actually the students that weren't always the top student in the class or weren't always the gifted students. It was the students who were used to being challenged, were used to having to overcome adversity. And a lot of times it's the students that had nothing else going on. This was their thing. They almost found their identity with it. And those were the ones that got the most out of it. And those were the hardest workers. And those were the ones that found the most success. Wow. You know, conversely, we would get some of the gifted students would come in, and for the first time, they actually felt challenged, where like everything was coming easy to them up to this point. Now they almost froze up. And I'll never forget, we had these two girls that would come in every day before we even start the meeting. They were already in the toolbox, working some idea that they talked about at recess. You know, they were like, "Oh, we're going to try it this way," and boom. And they were already ready to go, and they ended up getting into the finals in our competition that year. So
wow.
I find that it's you're absolutely right. Well, it's not always sometimes I think we might equate success. Success can be a lot of different things, but you really have to have an it factor. There's something that you can't learn in any teaching prep school. It almost has to be innate. Wouldn't you agree? Like it has to be kind of that people, you almost have to have that calling to be a teacher.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we often talk about that over here in England. Like, is teaching a vocation? Like, are you, are teachers born or bred?
Yeah.
And it's a really tricky one. But I like what you're saying as well. Like, I get a lot of students apply for my degree at university, and sometimes they're mature students, so they're in their 40s, 50s, and they're, I don't know if I'm too old to train to be a teacher. And I always say to them, like, teaching is not about age. Like, the fact that you'll have life experience that you can bring, you can talk about challenges you've overcome, you'll be able to relate to so many different things that have happened, so more chance you'll have things in connection with your students. And they're like, oh yeah. And so I think as well, we often think, get people training to be a teacher as soon as they finish university, get them into classrooms. But actually, I think it's the one profession where actually the older you are, perhaps again, I'm generalizing, no. But the more life experience you have can make you the better teacher. So again, that maybe questions, what is a teacher about? And you are that guide, like guiding your learners with their learning, but also in life. I think so for some of them really do not want to tell me anything about their private life, but some of them really do. And I think that was one thing I really learned for children when I was teaching in the primary school and elementary school. Some of them don't always have that adult at home who's available through no fault of the adult, because I'm a working mom. I know how hard it is when you're working, and you need a break yourself, and it's hard to always be emotionally available for your children. But if we can provide that as teachers, we know that the children can come in, they've got someone to talk to. That's really valuable, isn't it?
Absolutely. Catch full episodes of the Educators podcast every Thursday at 4 p.m. Real educators with the real issues in education. Thank you so much for watching, and of course, take care of yourself. Jeans passes. Anyone who likes, shares, and comments on this video. Have a great week.